The Ocean Decade Laboratories provides an international platform to intensify efforts and support actions for innovative and interactive ocean science. There will be a total of 7 laboratories whose topics are oriented towards the Ocean Decade outcomes. Each laboratory is a self-contained event and consists of 2 parts: a core event and several satellite activities. While the core event will be organized by the first International Ocean Decade Conference, a diverse range of satellite activities will be hosted by stakeholders interested in engaging in the Ocean Decade from all over the world. The satellite activities will take place within a time frame of 48 hours. The ultimate aim is to provide a wide array of interaction and networking opportunities. Do you have an idea for a possible workshop, exhibition, or other satellite activity? Apply to our call for online sessions on the event website. Once the 2-day Ocean Decade Laboratory is ended, its outcomes will be summarized in a final virtual wrap-up. Until it all starts again for the next of the 7 Ocean Decade outcomes.
Hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to our very first Ocean Decade Laboratory, an inspiring and engaging ocean. That is the title, hosted by the German Federal Ministry of Education and Research in partnership with the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO. My name is Monica Jones. I'm an international TV anchor and event host, and it is my great pleasure to guide you through the program of this core event, as we call it now, live from a studio in Berlin, Spandau. Core event does not imply that the other events that are taking place almost simultaneously are less important, but this is the one where we all come together, and after that there is the innovation workshop, there are satellite activities. In fact, there are 15 satellite activities taking place for this laboratory, 7 today, right after the core event, and 8 tomorrow. And I know what you're thinking, how on earth am I able to follow all these activities and participate? Probably you won't be able to, which is why we meet again tomorrow, late afternoon, Central European time, for a 90-minute wrap-up, so that we're all on the same page and have a pretty good idea what the outcomes were of this very first laboratory. Now, of course, we're meeting online. Yes, COVID-19 still exists. In some countries, the situation is worse than in others, so it's just safer to do it digitally. But that also means that a lot of technology is at play, like this online platform. I'm sure you already had an opportunity to take a closer look at it, but maybe we should do this together just to be on the safe side. I mean, the good news is you have found the live stream, because the live stream is where you see me right now, so that's already good. And you can take that live stream with you wherever you want to take it. Now, of course, you can change languages. We do have English, French, or Spanish with English subtitles. You can and you should engage. We do have the Ocean Forum chat. There you can submit questions, which I then pass on to the speakers as much as time allows. You can engage with other participants. For example, we have matchmaking options where you can meet like-minded spirits. We have the match roulette, which is slightly more daring. You see here the Ocean Library, very important. There you find tons of material, photos, documents, which you can download and share with others. Please do use the artist's name, give them a credit, and also use the hashtag Ocean Decade if you share it. Here you can have a look at the agenda, which gives you a good overview of everything that is on offer, and you can also register there for the innovation workshops. There's limited space available, first come, first serve, so you better have a look if you can still find a seat there. Then, of course, we do have those satellite activities that I mentioned. You also see the networking tables there, which you can join or create and invite others. And if all fails, there is a live help desk. So people are there to help you to get back to the live stream so you don't miss anything. If you watch us on YouTube, because this is also a live stream on YouTube, then that's brilliant. Welcome. However, you will not be able to engage and participate. This is only possible for registered participants on our platform. So, what is this laboratory and the Ocean Decade actually about? I'm sure you're all aware that the ocean is the largest ecosystem on Earth. It is crucial for the survival of humanity, of nature, and we also know that the ocean is under massive threat. There's climate change, there is pollution, you name it. It is high time that we join forces in order to do something about it, in order to protect it and make sure that the ocean is healthy and preserved, not just today, but for generations to come. And that is why the United Nations General Assembly proclaimed 2021 to 2030 as the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, the Ocean Decade. The first International Ocean Decade Conference was kicked off in June, and now follow 7 dedicated Ocean Decade laboratories over the next 10 months. Plus the satellite activities. But I know 2 gentlemen who can explain so much better what the Ocean Decade and the laboratories are about. So let's give them a warm welcome. Let's bring them in. Professor Dr. Martin Fiesbeck from the Geomar Helmholtz Center for Ocean Research in Kiel, where he's head of research unit Physical Oceanography. And Julien Barbier from the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO. A very warm welcome to both of you. Good to have you with us. And I would like to start with you, Julien. In a nutshell, because we don't want to spend too much time on this so that the participants can actually talk, but in a nutshell, what is the Ocean Decade? Why do we need it?
Thank you, Monica, and hello, colleagues. Good morning, good afternoon. So, in essence, I think the decade can be defined as a global movement, really, that presents a unique opportunity to bring together all segments of society, and not just the scientists, but also across the globe, to tackle some of the most urgent needs and challenges that the ocean is facing. We've heard so many times in the news, climate change, biodiversity loss, pollution, all those issues are upon us and the ocean and the services that the ocean renders. So the value proposition of a decade is really to transform our future and redefining our relationship with the ocean by harnessing the power of knowledge through collaboration across sectors, across geographies, generations, and academic disciplines. So Monica, I would say that the decade offers really a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to ensure a sustainable future. It's as simple as that. And for that, we have a plan. And this plan is going to change the way we design the science, the way we partner around the science, the way we communicate, and society uses the science to make decisions that impact the environment and our livelihoods. And this plan has been developed over the last 4 years with science, with industry, with governments, NGOs, the UN, of course, but also early career professionals who have come come together to really define this transformative vision of a decade and the 10 challenges that will be addressed in the coming years.
So we have about a decade to set things right, and we start with this conference series with the Decade Outcome 7. First of all, I mean, what is the decade outcome in general? And 7, I happen to know, that's the title of this event, an inspiring and engaging ocean. That is a somewhat surprising title, given that this is a conference for scientists. It seems very emotional and not very scientific. So what is the decade outcome, and outcome 7, what's that about?
Well, I think I will argue with you, Monica. This is not a conference for scientists. This is really about how the science is going to help with sustainable development. And for that, we need all sectors of society at the table. But let me go back to your question. Indeed, the Decade has identified 7 outcomes. And basically, this is where we want to be by the year 2030. We want a clean ocean where sources of pollution are identified and addressed. We want a healthy and resilient ocean with healthy marine ecosystems which are well managed. We want a productive ocean where the ocean has a capacity to feed the planet in a sustainable way. We want a predicted ocean where society really understands and can really respond to the changing ocean conditions that we are seeing. The safe ocean, where life and livelihoods are protected from hazards, for example. And we want an accessible ocean, where everybody has the capacity to access data, information, technology, and capacities. And finally, yes, indeed, we need an inspiring and engaging ocean where society understands and values the ocean in relation to human well-being and sustainable development. So in a sense, those 7 outcomes is really, no country in the world has the capacity to address any of those. So we really need to have collaboration to achieve those at the international level, but also across the type of stakeholders. Right. So, and to do this, we need also political support, we need financing, we need technological and social innovation. And these outcomes are basically going to guide the actions of all ocean stakeholders as they put their support, they identify actions in the coming years.
Right. Martin, I know that there's a lot of research happening as well. Please, your take on the inspirational part. Why?
Well, thank you, Monica. I think it is quite obvious when you think about the decade, which is one of action. And it is action towards a more sustainable human-ocean interaction. And that's very clear that the focus is humans, it's us. And how can we change our own behavior best if we weren't engaging around it? So I think about it, so the things that I care about, that I love, those are the things I want to see doing well. And so in some sense, what the inspiring and engaging ocean is really all about is making that connection more real between humans and the ocean. Now, for scientists, that's obvious because we work and live and with the ocean. But for many other citizens, it's maybe not so obvious. But once you come closer to the ocean, when you discover the deep sea and all the great things that are there, it is inspiring. It really motivates people to think about the ocean and to use the science that the Decade is providing to really further a more sustainable human-ocean interaction. So clearly, we need that spark of inspiration, that caring, that engagement with all citizens of the world and not just the scientists.
That sounds all very wonderful, but I still have my doubts. I mean, be inspired, enjoying the sea, and now this summer holidays, a lot of people will go to the seaside. Being inspired is one thing, but to actually trigger change is another. How is this event going to do that?
So when you look at some of the program, you find some great examples how individuals are really bringing that action and that inspiration forward. So you don't stop by enjoying the beach, which is a great starting point, but then you look just a little deeper. And we've noticed a lot of colleagues talk to us, call the researchers up and say, I'm finding this and that on the beach. Should it be there? With plastic, it's obvious that shouldn't be there. But you also see some other changes, that organisms show up that you've never seen before. Smells are there that you wonder about. You worry about, is it safe to swim in the ocean? So all these questions come once you start engaging with the ocean. And I think the next 48 hours really give some great examples how we can use science, but also arts, culture to really get people's minds and heads engaged with the ocean, so they really start to love the ocean. And once you love the ocean, then you also think a little bit deeper, not just enjoying it, the shallow beauty of the ocean, which I'm sure you should, but then also thinking a little bit deeper, is that also possible for the next generation? And is my action prohibiting them to enjoy the ocean as much as we can do it today?
Yeah. We have less than a minute. A short question for both of you. Very, very short answer, please. Is it doable within a decade, Julian?
I think so. I think if we beat the ignorance, and this is really what we are, struggling with, the ocean blindness, if we can really raise awareness and really highlight how the ocean is really contributing to our livelihoods, I think we will be halfway there. But of course, this is not enough. We need governments engagement. We need industry also working with us. We need communicators like yourself, Monica, who can really pass on the messages across different groups. So I think it's feasible. We certainly have a platform to do it. We have engagement mechanisms to do it. So now it's really for us to do it, and everybody has a role to play.
And Martin, you have 5 seconds. Yes or no?
Yes, we can. And if everybody works with us and loves the ocean, we can do it.
Well, thank you so much to both of you, Professor Martin Visbeck from Geomar Helmholtz Center for Ocean Research and Julian Barbier from the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO. Thank you so much for explaining the Ocean Decade and what it's all about to us. Thank you. Which means, ladies and gentlemen, today is the first of 7 Ocean Decade Laboratories. We look at the decade outcome number 7 with a poetic title, An Inspiring and Engaging Ocean. Let's dive into it now, and do remember that you can participate actively, for example, by submitting questions on the chat. Let's start this Ocean Decade Laboratory with some inspiring, engaging visuals. Here is a video now from one of the...
Mas ela é quase toda água. Não é coincidência que mais da metade de você também seja. O oceano é sua primeira casa. A casa de todos. Tudo começou aqui. Tudo depende daqui. Somos um imenso ecossistema respirando juntos. Um transformando o outro. Assim como a água que molda a rocha, você também tem o poder de mudar o mundo à sua volta. Oceanos conectam continentes. Cada ser deste planeta recebe seu imenso abraço. Oceanos são mistério. Acolhem espécies que nem a ciência conhece. Mais gente esteve na Lua do que em suas profundezas. E é a própria Lua que ensina com sua dança das marés. Tudo que vai, volta. Oceanos são seu espelho, é hora de olhar para ele. Oceanos também são fúria, um retrato de nossas emoções. Somos transformação em estado puro. Ninguém se banha 2 vezes no mesmo oceano. Uma nova onda está crescendo, não deixe ela passar. Os próximos anos do planeta azul começam agora, hoje mesmo, e dependem de você, de cada um de nós.
Video there from the Boticário Group Foundation from Brazil, one of the decade's key partners. Brings us to the first segment of this laboratory, driving the change, the relationship between society and the ocean. Now, in this session, we will explore both the science and the emotional connection that currently exists between society and the ocean, and how these connections can actually be harnessed to drive change. Now, this session will be steered by Leila Ben Hassan. She's the CEO and founder of Blue Jay Communication. Again, you can join the discussion by submitting your questions, because at the end of the panel, we will have a few minutes time for a Q&A. But first, Leila, over to you.
Thank you, Monica. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Are you ready for change? What drives you to change? Is it rational or emotional motivations? My name is Leila Ben Hassan. I am the founder and CEO of Blue Jay Communication, and I am also the International Ambassador for Women in Maritime Association in Africa. I am pleased to be one of the co-moderators today of the first Ocean Decade Laboratory. We have now for you a panel discussion about driving the change, the relationship between society and the ocean. In this session, we are going to discuss our readiness to change, big changes to our daily lives. How much did we change lately? That we eat, how did we eat, how do we behave, how do we spend, how do we consume? The COVID-19 pandemic has pushed every one of us all over the world to make big changes to protect ourselves and the people we love, our children, grandchildren, parents, simply because our life and their lives matter. COVID-19 has clearly demonstrated how important science is and how much we need it, and still need scientists to feed policymakers with information to make the right decision on time and to save lives. However, science has and continues to play a much broader role in policy making and behavioral change. A role that many of us do not see on a daily basis, as we have over the past 18 months. It has been demonstrated that explaining science behind government policy by people who understand the science can and does make people change. It could be argued that without the science, a lot of the measures that governments have to put in place have been ignored by people. So, how do we ensure that science continues to drive change, real change at the pace we need? How many times did we hear the word oxygen in the last 18 months? Do you associate oxygen with ocean? In fact, we tend to forget that the oceans we are breathing are from the ocean. 50% of the oxygen we breathe are from the ocean. So our health depends on the ocean. And not only this, our life in general, our food, well-being, transport, economy, trade, also depend on our oceans. Hence, its health is critical to our health. The objectives of this panel are to learn how can we drive the step change sustainable behavior? How can we anchor science in policy framework for long-lasting changes? How to create empathy and provide equitable access to blue spaces? How can we use past to inspire and engage people for the future? I am here to introduce you to our panelists who will explain how the relationship is between society and the ocean, and how can we move forward together towards an inspiring and engaging oceans. Among the panelists, we have two representatives of the endorsed Decade program that will be looking at these issues. First, Dr. Emma McKinley, Research Fellow at Cardiff University and Chair of the Marine Social Science Network. Then we have Dr. Gerald Singh, Assistant Professor at the Memorial University of Newfoundland and Deputy Research Director at the Nippon Foundation Ocean Nexus Center. Finally, we have Dr. Anthony Furr, Co-Chair Ocean Decade Heritage Network and Director at First Limited. You can find more details of our speakers on the platform of this event. But before diving into this discussion, please let's watch together a video from Sir Peter Kluckman, a President-elect of the Board of International Science Council, who couldn't make it with us today, but he sent us his video. Thank you.
Opportunity to make some brief remarks on behalf of the International Science Council and also the International Network for Government Science Advice. COVID has brought the attention of virtually every citizen to the fact that science can be critical to good policy making, and it may also have demonstrated that the consequences of when science advice is ignored. There's not one single issue in public policy where robust evidence could not improve the quality of policy making. These science advisory ecosystems are in a rather patchy state, even in many developed countries. It's important in this context to understand that evidence informs but does not make policy. Policy making involves many other factors: economic, political, electoral, and diplomatic considerations, all in the end determine the final decisions that policymakers make. Nevertheless, science advice is critically important. It provides the basic information on which the options that a policymaker might choose are informed. Oceans are the largest component of the largely ungoverned spaces on our planet, and so when we consider ocean policy, the additional complexity of a multilateral system where natural interests need to be subsumed for the global good, but often are not. With issues of science diplomacy, and we not only need science advice going to the domestic part of policy making, but also into the foreign ministries. And yet, sadly, few countries have institutionalized science advice within their foreign ministries. Further, at the level of the multilateral system, which is in a rather weak state at the moment, science advice may or may not be formalized. Increasingly, the International Science Council is focusing on the state of science advice in both domestic and international mechanisms, and finds itself increasingly offering itself as a broker at the international interface. Key lesson from both COVID and climate change is the importance of a plurality of scientific disciplinary inputs from behavioral science, economic, political science, as well as the natural and technological sciences. Similarly, ocean sciences needs this broad range of inputs. The concept of transdisciplinarity is increasingly important, yet is a very misunderstood term. Stakeholder engagement from the outset. It requires framing the question from the outset through multiple disciplinary lenses. And as yet, the institutions of science, funders, academies, and universities have yet to find ways to properly support and evaluate transdisciplinary science. The ISC sees it has a key role in working through this challenge in the coming years. In your conversations.
Great. Clearly, Peter was emphasizing on the importance of science and how it can and should be inform and policy makers to make the decisions. However, to make those changes, policy needs to be followed by social behavior. Is science the ultimate motivator to change, or there are more than that? Is it our identity, our cultural value, our marine heritage that determine our social behavior? Emma, I would like to start with you. So please, based on your experience of the emotional connection between European Union citizens and their aquatic ecosystem, could you please describe how emotions, addition to knowledge and awareness, can play a critical role in decision making, in supporting and catalyzing behavioral change?
Thanks, Leila. That's a great question. I guess the first thing to say is that the call for interdisciplinarity and transdisciplinarity and bringing in that broadest possible definition of ocean science is part of that. And so understanding emotions through the lenses of marine social sciences is a really crucial component of how we create that transformed relationship between society and the ocean over the next 10 years. And actually, it's pretty early. In the question, it was commissioned by the European Commission Mission Board, who recognised that changing behaviour is not just about knowing about a system, it's not just about the knowledge, it's very much about connecting to those spaces. And actually what they felt was that we didn't know enough about how people connect with and have emotional values and attitudes towards our aquatic ecosystems. Really what they were trying to help get us to explore was what's the role of emotions in decision making. And actually there's been research recently which has really highlighted that emotion is a fundamental component of decision making, of making memories, of influencing attitudes and behaviours. And while that work has been explored across nature, actually focus on ocean and coast has been fairly limited. It's a fairly new and emerging area of work. So while we know that it's really important, and we've heard that you don't protect what you don't care about, and I think some of the messages that have come out in the last 20 minutes about needing to understand that, how we can get people to care and inspire and get that sense of wonder is really, really important as we think about how we can transition across the next 10 years and stimulate that behaviour change. But to do that, we need to understand where people are at first. We need to understand what their emotional connection is now. And then we can use that to help flavour our communication materials, to feed into our co-develop and feed into our science. And there's lots of opportunity for us to then bring people into those conversations over the next 10 years and beyond.
Absolutely. Thank you. We need to get people inspired and engaged. So Gerald, how can get inspiration and engagement to promote sustainable development?
Thank you, Leila, for the question. So I think before we get to the question of how can inspiration and engagement promote sustainable development, we have to think about how it doesn't. And sustainability initiatives historically and routinely employ this notion that more education and communication can lead to behavior and value change towards being pro-environmental or pro-sustainable in Western notions about what environment and sustainability are. And we routinely see that model fail. So for centuries, maybe millennia, we've really known that knowledge about how something works doesn't translate into what to do about it. Okay, so this is probably most famously captured by David Hume in his It Is Odd problem. So that's centuries old. We also know that historically more information has led to, about the ocean, has led to greater industrialization and unsustainable behavior and actions taken on the ocean. Okay, so there's power issues at play. Who, you know, if there's more knowledge, who can act on it, right? And for what interests? We now also have considerable evidence that people filter new knowledge through their prior beliefs. New knowledge does little to predictably change attitudes and behaviors. We don't know how people will act in response. So we really need to ask who needs inspiration and for what engagement. So the program that the Nippon Foundation Ocean Nexus Center is really leading is really set to flip this classical sustainability education model to really inspire the scientific community to engage with coastal and ocean people, ocean-dependent people around the world. Because most coastal communities who are often left out of decision-making processes already have values and worldviews related to the oceans. If you try to tell them how to think about the oceans, it often alienates them. And instead of trying to change their perspectives, we see a lot more productive approach to be learning about how diverse groups around the world are already engaged with the oceans and work with them to address their problems on their terms. So this is really going to help address the issue of equity in ocean sustainability.
And Gerald, how will your program plan to engage and inspire people to connect with the oceans?
So we really want to make it very clear that this isn't an issue where we know the solutions and the problem is communication. This has to be a research area as well. Just how do we engage with and what do we learn from people? So really addressing questions like what are the diverse values and knowledge systems that people around the world already use to relate to their environment? What existing theories of change do they operate in? And why continue to turn to models that have so often failed. Okay, so we really hope to aim to inspire the scientific community to become more policy literate, understand how decisions operate and act out in the real world, and engage with people who will face the consequences of sustainability initiatives, because it's ultimately people, power, and politics that determine the contribution of ocean science to sustainable development. And we want to make sure that the people who weather the consequences have a say goes on.
So you have a program for each category, for decision makers, for scientists, and for the communities, basically. Okay, and
yeah,
Anthony.
So, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so I move on to Anthony to understand more about the Cultural Heritage Network program. What is it about? If you can tell us a little bit about your program and why is it relevant to the UN Ocean Decade?
Okay, well, thanks for the question, Leila. Yeah, so the Cultural Heritage Framework Program, it's been endorsed in order to support and integrate the contribution of cultural heritage activities within the Ocean Decade. So around the world, cultural heritage encapsulates long-standing relationships between people and the sea in all their diversity. And cultural heritage is enormously important to how people engage with the sea now and will do so in the future. So it's a source of inspiration as we find sort of new and more sustainable relationships with the ocean over the next 10 years. And so as an example, heritage usually combines science and technology with perspectives that are rooted in the social sciences and humanities. So our framework program is well placed to build alliances that transcend those traditional boundaries, which we've already heard about, those traditional boundaries between disciplines. So over the next decade, you'll see cultural heritage appearing in places you might not expect, such as discussions about pollution risk, small-scale fisheries, rebuilding the blue economy, and so on.
That's very good. And what difference will endorsement as a decade make for cultural heritage during the UN Ocean Decade?
So the inclusion of this cultural heritage program as part of the decade is a really big step. It recognizes that our scientific knowledge and understanding will be stronger if we also appreciate the human dimension to the ocean and its incredible time depth. So people have been living with the sea in sustainable ways for hundreds and thousands of years. An endorsement by the Ocean Decade means that we can bring archaeological, historical, and cultural perspectives right into the center of global ocean science and policy making. So I think we can do, for example, a great deal to challenge the analytical separation of nature and culture, which is deeply embedded in law and administration and often gets in the way of offering effective solutions. So from a cultural heritage perspective, we can show how in many different circumstances and over long periods of time, we need to understand ecological systems as having and relying upon a social and cultural component. And so cultural heritage in that context, I think, can offer solutions to ecological and climate-related problems.
Interesting, very interesting. What are the solutions for climate change also? So, Emma, I am and I'd like to ask you, are there any mechanism or strategies that we or can use to up the emotional connection between the people and the ocean? And if yes, so I would like also to ask you if there are practical actions that you can give us that governments or can take to increase this connection.
Thanks, Leila. I think that question speaks to something Gerald said already, actually, that in many cases, there are places where emotional connection does exist. So I think we have to be careful about just assuming that there's always a disconnect. That's something that we found in that particular report and looking at some of the work in Europe, but it's not the case everywhere. So I think there's an opportunity across the UN Ocean Decade to really think about what those different diverse emotional connections, ways of knowing and living and valuing our ocean and coastal spaces are across different types of communities and audiences, and learning from them, as Gerald said, so that we can then use those skills, those knowledges, and like to improve decision making, to embed that into our governance for the future. But in cases where there might be lower levels of emotional connection and where there is that emotional deficit, as it was phrased by the mission board, I think there are a range of different kind of opportunities that we can look at over the next 10 years. Part of that is using the cultural and heritage lens, as Anthony mentioned, to really connect people and remind people that that is how they engage with the ocean, and really kind of highlighting that connection and relationship between people and their blue space. There's a need to really recognise a diverse set of actors and stakeholders in these discussions to make sure we're bringing new voices, the voices of those coastal communities, into the conversation so that we know where they're at, whether it is a community that doesn't connect with the ocean. Why is that? What are the barriers to that? How can we help them? What are the ways that we can support engagement and communication and increasing connection? And that could be things like encouraging citizen science programs. It could be through a range of ocean literacy initiatives that I know are going to be talked about over the next 2 days. So I think there's a real opportunity for us to, first, as long as we're looking at things from those multiple lenses, then we've got an opportunity to address those challenges and those gaps in our understanding.
I did mention blue spaces. How can we equitably use the blue spaces?
Was that to me? You broke up a little bit there.
Yes, you were.
Thank you, sorry. Yeah, well, I guess some of that comes down to understanding what the barriers might be to using a blue space. So, for example, we've had some conversations here in the UK around how access to blue spaces might be influenced by the infrastructure you have access to, or by the fact that the coastal path is not accessible to people with disabilities, or that culturally it's just not a space that you go into, or that you don't feel welcome in. And so I think we have to recognise that the ocean is for everyone, and that we create those opportunities and understand what those barriers and challenges are so that we can solve them and address them in the next 10 years. We really have a platform to make that change in the next decade. And so it's really crucial that we have those conversations and we kind of explore what the challenges might be and get that insight now so we can integrate it into our programs of work in the next 9.5 years or so.
Yeah, oceans is for everybody and we have to use the space equitably. I am moving to Gerald, please. We need some tangible examples or some output of from your Ocean Decade program, and how will they contribute to the Ocean Decade sustainable development? Just in 1 minute and a half.
Sure. Thanks, Leila. I'll keep it brief. So our program is really focused, again, on the kind of science policy interface and how science contributes to sustainable development. And so we're really planning on hosting workshops, including hosting events with the Ocean Decade on co-design specifically, really centered around this SDG principle of leave no one behind. So how can we co-design research that's accountable to coastal and ocean-dependent people? And that often means allowing them to have a say in what the research problem is, what the challenges are, and how to explore solutions. We also want to create toolkits and research frameworks that are explicitly solutions-oriented, so not just diagnosing problems, and really led in collaboration with coastal communities.
Excellent. That's very good. Anthony, unfortunately, the time is running. So one question for you also, how can cultural heritage inspire ocean action and engage people in sustainable development?
Okay, so yeah, very briefly, it's really important for us to get to know how our predecessors lived with the sea. So to have our horizons widened and also our own perceptions challenged. So we're facing urgent crises, mainly armed with concepts, data and understanding from only the last few decades, which have all been pretty damaging. So humanity's relationship with the ocean spans millennia, and we should really value and use that experience. I'll give you a very quick example. So if you think for a moment about how people used to travel the oceans, until about 150 years or so ago, travel by sea only used renewable energy, the sails, wind and the sails. And this is still represented by traditional boats and magnificent shipwrecks. And they prove how wind power could be used very effectively. And just a few generations ago, myriad ways of life and whole trading networks have been carbon neutral for millennia. Now, we can't go back to that, but perhaps their ingenuity and experience is something we can still aspire to. And I think that's that's how it should be inspiring us today. Thank you.
Yeah, just in a few seconds, how can I commit as a person or as an organization, Anthony?
Just get in touch with us.
How can I commit in a few seconds as a person or as an organization?
Ocean Decade, as a person and as an organization through the Ocean Decade Heritage Network.
Excellent, very, very good. I think it is very interesting. I think the oceans is a blue space, and we all agree it's all about connection. There is a scientific aspect there to that, and there is also the emotional aspect. For you, Emma, how can we as individuals and organization in few seconds commit?
Come along and get engaged with the Ocean Literacy Research Programme that will be happening over the next year or so.
Excellent, very good. I think, unfortunately, time is running very, very fast, and it's very interesting. I think we can find more about what you do on the website of this event, and I think we can have just a little bit. I can see we have a little bit of time, so I will leave it, Gerald, to you. How can I commit as a person? What do you say? What do you advise at the starting point?
Well, I would say that please join our workshops that we put out for our Ocean Decade activities, and I would say go out to learn about how decision making is done at the political and local level, and don't assume that scientific advances immediately contributes to decisions in ways that you can predict.
So what else will you say?
Sorry, what's that?
So what else? I mean, you said that is the policy making, but it's not enough. What else? I mean, what else can we add as a commitment to engage to an inspiring ocean?
I see. I would say that it's really worth, if you're going to be doing research that's contributing to sustainable development, first go talk to communities that are facing challenges and get a sense of what the challenges are. Don't make assumptions about what they face and what the solutions would be. Start by talking with them and getting an understanding from them what the challenges are first.
Excellent, very, very good. Another, Monica, you are here? Okay. Thank you.
I'm here. I've got loads of questions. Can you hear me, Leila?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you so much. Sorry to intrude so abruptly, but time is sadly up, and we did get questions in, and I definitely want to take the opportunity to pass a couple of those questions on to your fantastic panel, if that's okay with you, Leila. And I'm starting right away with Emma, because all of this was about driving change, and the question is, can you actually measure people's connection to the ocean so that we can see the change that was instilled by our initiatives? Can you measure that?
It's tricky. It's a difficult one to measure. There is work being done on that. So there is work being done on the concept of ocean connectedness. There is work being done through some of the ocean literacy programs to explore that emotional connection and understand where people are at but then obviously you need to then go and redo work with those communities, go back to those communities, whether it's through a survey or interviews or through using art, whatever approach, to then see how things might have changed. We don't have a great amount of national big scale data that I'm aware of. We're starting to get that. So we need more work to kind of really understand what's being done. For Canada have done some amazing work through their Canadian Ocean Literacy Strategy. The UK have done some work recently. But yeah, there's more work to be done to really understand how we can measure change in that emotional connection.
Okay. I would like to go to Gerald now, because that was quite intriguing about scientists being more policy literate. I can see a sort of conflict of interest there ultimately? Because policymakers usually have a different agenda than scientists. But do scientists, Gerald, do they actually have the time and the resources to dedicate themselves to be more policy literate?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think, so first for the issue of conflict of interest, I think at an overall level, conflict of interest is ultimately impossible to avoid. There's no way we can ever avoid other interests affecting what we do, but I think we can try to regulate which interests we follow. So yes, if it's, but at the same time, I would also say current science funding mechanisms steer science towards policy priorities anyway. It just really depends on how that occurs. So what can we do? Well, I think part of the issue is I'm not trying to blame scientists individually. I think the scientific institution, as it's set up, that's focused on really internally driven publishing metrics and how much funding you bring in, et cetera, is really preventing the science community from engaging with policy. I think what's really needed is a rethink, a reevaluation of what scientific impact is, who it's serving, because if it's all focused on kind of these inward-driven metrics of excellence that's often undefined yet measured, we're not going to get very far. But if instead there's an increased focus on what science contributes and how it affects decisions outside of itself, things might really change. Right. And I would also say this is where the power issue really comes into play about what kind of policy, which kind of decision makers. If we're trying to elevate the people who often don't get a say in decision making, that can really affect the equity aspect of sustainable development.
All right, thank you, Gerald. I have one more for Anthony, and time is running as we speak. It's a very long question. I'll try to make it more succinct. So it's about your program looking at both physical cultural heritage and maybe also the intangible cultural heritage, the kind of cultural heritage the communities have, and they may not be so happy about sharing it because it's theirs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think every time you have to respect people's own wishes and communities' own wishes with respect to their own heritage. But I think I don't think there's a hard line between tangible cultural heritage, the physical stuff, and intangible people's beliefs and thoughts about that. And those in our everyday lives are the physical and those other senses. They all work together. So I wouldn't see a hard line. And certainly, what we're interested in is not only the physical heritage, but how people think about that heritage, and also those aspects of heritage which don't have a physical expression, such as stories or traditions, all sorts of different dimensions to it. But certainly we would see that all as being one thing. And yes, we have to be very careful and sensitive to people's. We don't want to go appropriating people's cultures without their good wishes and goodwill. Thank you.
Right. Well, thank you all. And I'm sure there's so much more to explore. Luckily, there's a platform so people can reach out to you, connect with you, and continue the discussion. Leila, Emma, Gerald, Anthony, thank you so much for your contribution and all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to our next speaker, who has a very special, a very close relationship with the ocean. Marine socialist scientist she is, big wave surfer, and she's written a book that has been released recently, 50 Things to Do by the Sea. Please welcome Dr. Iski Britton, who's joining us now. Iski, good to see you. Before we get to those 50 things to do by the sea, because that is really intriguing me, I mean, your relationship to the ocean is very close. How would you actually define it? How would you describe your relationship? What makes it so close?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Monica. I mean, as both a surfer and marine social scientist growing up on the northwest coast of Ireland, the sea is completely shaped I suppose my sense of who I am, my identity, connection to place, sense of belonging. So much so even, with my name, Eski, it's the name of my parents' favorite wave, a surf spot on the West Coast, where a salmon river comes out and shapes the wave. So really, and then Esk comes from, it's the Irish word for fish. So my identity is quite, literally tied to waves, river, wild Atlantic salmon. And for me, that just really emphasizes how entangled it all is. If the sea, the river, the salmon aren't healthy, then neither am I, neither are we. And just how much we're all shaped and formed by the ocean. And so, that's really then I realized motivated so much of my work, this understanding that we can't be well in the sick sea. And I think as a surfer, we're literally immersed in the ocean. It's so much more than just a metaphor. It's a lived experience. Like we're quite literally entangled in sea and surf. Seawater infuses our bodies, shapes our very microbiome. Fascinating research coming out by Dr. Cliff Capono called the Surfer Biome Project. And so it's, quite literally shaping who we are, that we're not separate, and our health and well-being is completely entangled with the health of the ocean.
So do we all have to take up surfing now in order to really understand the ocean?
Absolutely not. And we'll get to that. There are many different ways. Someone who straddles worlds of surfing, art, science, I'm keenly aware that there are many different ways of knowing and connecting, and many different types of knowledge, as we've just heard.
Exactly. And you have a very specific knowledge. It's in your title. You're a marine social scientist. Where does the social come into, and how does that help you to engage and inspire others?
Well, the marine social scientists, we're definitely hybrids. It's very interdisciplinary. But at the essence of it all, for me, is how do we better understand that human relationship with the sea, which is, obviously what this whole session is about. But in particular, exploring how might we restore lost connections, where those connections with the ocean have been lost, especially in a more inclusive way. And then to do that, we also need to look at how do we drive that change? How do we create that reconnection? And for me, the greatest motivator is love. I'm completely driven by that, passion I have for the ocean. So how does that translate for other people? How do we deepen a more intimate and emotional connection? And the importance often of creating these more enabling, inclusive, and healing ocean spaces, so that those who may feel excluded actually feel welcome and have a more positive experience. So some tangible examples would be work I've done through the Be Like Water program with women in Iran. So through the water, reconnecting with their bodies. And there's so much evidence coming out now to support the transformative and healing qualities of immersion or being in, on, or near water, and the ocean in particular. But I think it's especially powerful for women and girls. We've been conditioned so much of our lives, especially when it comes to our bodies, to contract, make ourselves smaller, invisible. And I've seen again and again across cultures how these experiences, you can call it ocean therapy, but lots of different ways of connecting with the ocean can be so empowering, because it also brings us back into our bodies. And interestingly, in this work, I've also seen when you have these shared experiences through getting in the sea and playing or surfing, it also creates a social connection and fosters community building.
Social connection with other people or with the ocean?
With other people, yeah. It breaks down barriers that we kind of maybe have on land, because we're carrying around these land personas or how we're supposed to appear. And something happens when you cross that threshold into water. I've seen it again and again, especially with surf, because there is that playful element that's very disarming and is quite a social leveler, I would say. And then I want to just add to it, and we've heard it before too, the need to acknowledge how these inequalities persist, especially in coastal spaces around access. So I'm part of another amazing project called Inclusi, seeking to foster and promote greater inclusion and accessibility for people with different able bodies, physical disabilities in the sea and surfing.
And Eski, I am heartbroken because I wanted to ask you about those 50 things to do. As I say, I can come up maybe with 10, maybe if I stretch myself 12, not 50. But I'm afraid we'll have to leave that to another point. Final question, what is your next, very briefly, what is your next action by the sea, your personal one?
Ooh, yeah, I'm actually on a small island called Inishbofin off the west coast of Ireland, and it's where I go to access my creativity. And I find the best way often to do that is just to go and wander, notice, observe, beachcomb. It's a great place to sort of reconnect with ourselves. And wherever you are, find your water and connect with it, even if you're not by the coast.
I will remember that. I will remember that. Wherever I am, find my water. Iski Britton, Dr. Britton, thank you so much for that. Again, I'm sure people will try and reach out to you for more, but thank you so much for sharing that experience and inspiring us. Thank you. And everybody out there, if you feel now inspired, and I'd hate to think you're not, then why don't you share your thoughts and ideas, maybe even images on our interactive wall, which you find actually below the live stream where the agenda is. Click onto the interactive wall. You can publish content regarding 2 questions. What does your inspiring, engaging ocean represent, and how to reach a balanced relationship between oneself, society, and the ocean? Why don't you do that? Maybe not right away. You can start now, because we give you some more inspiration with a video on the Ocean Decade Challenge 10 Change Humanity's Relationship with the Ocean.
Ocean Decade Challenge number 10. Change humanity's relationship with the ocean. How do we go from the ocean we have to the ocean we want? Let's start with a bit of imagination. Imagine an ocean that we no longer take for granted. An ocean that we respect for regulating our climate and inspiring hundreds of cultures around the world. Imagine the power of a whole generation of all ages and walks of life, committed to saving our planet's largest ecosystem. Ocean knowledge gives us a clear picture of the worsening human impacts on the ocean. Education and ocean literacy give us the keys to changing our behavior so that we can protect the ocean. Time for change is running out, but the next 10 years of ocean action will be critical for a step change in our relation with the ocean. The Ocean Decade is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for humanity to reconnect with the ocean, understand its importance to our survival, and use that knowledge to transform our relationship. In the ocean we want, we live respectfully with our shared ocean, carefully and sustainably managing its precious resources. Are you up to meeting this Ocean Decade Challenge? Join us today.
Join us today. Well, luckily you're already here in order to attend our second segment, where we learn more about inspiring to care, the power of communication. So this segment will look into how communication can build awareness and knowledge and drive action to restore and protect the ocean. It will include also the role of change makers from the fields of science, sports, even food, and how they inspire to care. Very interesting session there. It will be hosted by Dr. Divan Amon. She's a marine biologist from Trinidad and the founder of Fisheries. So good to see you, and I look forward to your session. Let me just point out to all the panelists, or not the speakers, participants, that's the word I was looking for. All the participants who don't speak right now, they can do so in writing on the chat so we can bring their questions in. And with that, Diva, it's over to you.
Thank you so much, Monica, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody who is joining us today. Welcome. So today, in our second segment, we're going to have a moderated panel discussion that will address several things, from leveraging the power of communication for the Ocean Decade to innovative approaches to scientific communication. And of course, as we just heard from Monica, what is the role of change makers, of influencers, of innovation, and of coalition from diverse sectors to really change that narrative and foster action in the Ocean Decade. So today, to help us do that, we are joined by 4 influential individuals who are working to communicate ocean science to many and really help to change that narrative. So they're showing us how we can engage others, how we can inspire others, how we can empower others to really create that positive and powerful change. And we're certainly hoping that they can sprinkle some of their magical pixie dust on us all today so that we can begin to foster that action in this first Ocean Decade Laboratory. So today, I'd really, before we introduce the panelists, I'd really like to challenge everyone to create decade action and partnerships that are co-designed and to lead to society and that lead to societal outcomes. We really hope that this panel will, spark ideas for the breakout rooms that will follow and the interactive workshops that will follow. So our panelists, our esteemed panelists. So first off, we have Richard Vives, who's the CEO of the Ocean Agency. We also are joined by Mirella Lace, who's the founder of the Fish Market. We're also joined by Dr. Katie Croft Bell, who's a National Geographic explorer and the founder of the Ocean Discovery League. And finally, by Anne-Cecile Turner, who's a sustainability program leader at the Ocean Race. So if you'd like more details about each of these wonderful panelists, please do go and check out their bios on the platform, of course, oceandecade-.com. And, with that, also just a reminder to say that questions and answers, we're going to be taking them towards the end of this panel. So please do put them into the chat. We really look forward to receiving them. So with that, let's kick it off today. Katie, I'm going to throw it to you. You're an ocean scientist who has been increasingly combining deep sea exploration and science communication. First, you did that through the Ocean Exploration Trust, then All Hands on Deck while you were at MIT, and now you've just founded your own NGO. So I was hoping you could tell us a little bit more about the evolution of communication throughout your work.
Absolutely, Diva. Thank you. So with the Ocean Exploration Trust, which is where I ran all the expeditions on exploration vessel Nautilus, and that involved using remotely operated vehicles and satellite telepresence technology to both explore the deep sea and also to share the expeditions live with people on shore. It was fantastic. The ship is still operating, and we've reached many, many people all over the world. But one sort of challenge that I saw was that it was very one-sided. We were mostly Americans on a boat doing the research and pushing it out to whomever wanted to watch. Sort of parachute science on television, I guess you could say. So then I moved to the MIT Media Lab a few years ago, which is filled with people from all different disciplines, none of which included oceanography. I was the only oceanographer there. And that really pushed me to start thinking about ocean exploration from different perspectives and to begin exploring ways to broaden access to deep sea exploration beyond the ship through different technologies and approaches that all hinged on bringing very different communities together. And one of my most successful projects was hosting the National Ocean Exploration Forum in 2018 that was called All Hands on Deck. And I made a point of including filmmakers, toy makers, service organizations, others who really, when I invited them, had no idea why I was inviting them. Because they weren't in the ocean space and they weren't quite sure what they were doing there. But them, along with ocean scientists and engineers, really led to this amazing creativity considering how to broaden participation in ocean exploration. Now, as you mentioned, I'm launching a new nonprofit, the Ocean Discovery League, which is really going to take many of those lessons that we learned over those few years that I was at MIT to focus on co-designed technologies like low-cost sensor and camera systems for data collection and artificial intelligence for data analysis to enable capacity building with communities around the world so that we can really start to break down the barriers that make deep sea exploration expensive, inefficient, and very much elite. And by increasing access, we'll not only increase the size and diversity of the team required to do the job, but also accelerate ocean discovery and understanding, which, as we all know, is absolutely critical to our survival.
Thank you so much, Katie. I mean, that's really fascinating to hear that evolution through your career. And And I think, when you touched on, there are so many things you touched on that really resonated, but especially the need to bring in more users of the ocean into the space from, as you said, toy makers, filmmakers, and of course, app makers and other users of the ocean. So, I wanted to, before we jump on to some of the other individuals who are on this panel that are working with apps and other fora, I guess we'll say, I wanted to bring in Richard, who has also been using ocean imagery to really begin to garner public support to inspire policy and funding. And yes, Katie, that's something you did with the Deep Ocean and continue to do. And of course, Richard is working in a very different ecosystem, shallow water coral reefs. So Richard, can you tell us a bit more about how you did this and why visuals and images are so important to inspire people to care?
Well, imagery has been fundamental to the work of the Ocean Agency. I think imagery is absolutely key. You've got, 99.9% of people don't dive, and so they don't really have any connection with the ocean. So it's really difficult to communicate about issues such as coral bleaching unless you've got very, very powerful imagery. So that's what we decided to do, when we started the Ocean Agency 10 years ago, and our first project was to take Google Street View underwater. And more people went virtual diving in that first week than have ever been diving in history, which shows you the power of imagery and collaboration. And it's been fundamental to really showcasing issues like coral bleaching. When you get an image that stops you in your tracks, it really gets intrigue around the issue. And that's what's been sort of critically important to our work. And we've been very keen to make all this imagery open source. So we've launched the Ocean Decade Image Library, so the image bank, so oceanimage.org, to make all this imagery freely available and engage people sort of on a massive scale. And, they say an image is worth 1,000 words. In ocean conservation, especially in ocean science, I think it's worth a lot more than that. Some of our images have generated millions of dollars in media exposure around these issues, and it can really be transformative in terms of public interest.
That is just so wonderfully summed up how imagery really has your work, I should say, really has the ability to transcend that challenge of conveying not just beauty and wonder and the magnificence of the ocean and the habitats there, but also how we're impacting it. And that's, of course, one of the crucial challenges of today, right? So I was hoping we could now jump to Mirella, who, of course, is working with another way in which we are impacting the ocean through our fisheries. And so, Mirella, you've made the move from doing science to engaging with consumers via the Fish Market app that your team has created. And so can you tell us a little bit more about what the app aims to do and whether you feel that you've had a greater impact in your current role?
Yeah, thanks for the question and thanks for being part of this panel too. So the Fish Market is a mobile app for reconnecting small-scale fishers to local consumers in support of food sovereignty and fishery sustainability. And what the app does is that it provides a platform where fishers can directly sell their catch to local consumers for a fair price, and consumers can also increase their access to fresh, locally caught fish and seafood in support of those fishing communities and of fishery sustainability. So what the Fish Market really aims to do is to shorten the fish chain and increase benefits, and in doing so, increase benefits to both consumers and fishers. To small-scale fishers, it offers increased opportunities for a bigger customer base and more negotiation power for fair prices, and to consumers, benefits in terms of freshness, price, and availability of fish and seafood. But most importantly, what the app does is to increase a sense of connection of people to their local food systems, where their food comes from, and of consumers to their local communities and to the ocean ecosystems. So I believe it strengthens that connection through a platform that facilitates communication and connects people through food, which is something that we can all relate to, and we all become really engaged when it becomes about food and where our food comes from, and the ocean being part of it. So in terms of my move from being an ocean scientist and oceanographer to becoming an entrepreneur and having this mobile app now, I see my journey as moving from an oceanographer who was studying seagrass ecosystems and conservation of sea turtles, who then realized that I also needed to look into people, because I really needed to understand too, who were those people who were going to help conserve the green sea turtles and who would maybe become interested in doing that and tap into environmental stewardship. Because of that, I transitioned from being an oceanographer to a marine social scientist. And from then, I realized that we also needed to communicate science better, and we also needed to engage more with the different stakeholder groups. So I started working with knowledge mobilization, and I'm a knowledge mobilization coordinator now. And from that role too, I realized again that maybe there could be more that could be done on the ground to really engage people with something that they felt a need on. So I realized there was this need for a bigger connection between consumers and fishers, and a bigger connection of people to their food and their food systems and the ocean ultimately. So that transition, I feel that at each of those steps, and each of them have a different impact. We can all make an impact being an ocean scientist or a communicator or an entrepreneur. We can all have an impact in each of those different fields. But I believe what I learned the most through this journey was really that how we can make that different impact in those different fields. And it gave me a more of a holistic view of how each of those can contribute, and the power of partnerships. If you don't transition through all those boundaries of disciplinary boundaries and geographic boundaries, or boundaries in the way we see science and social sciences, natural sciences. If you don't do that yourself as part of your career, I see a huge benefit through partnerships and connecting with different organizations that would then give you that more of a holistic view of how you can make a bigger impact in the ocean and make that impact together, joining forces. Thank you.
Thank you, Mirella. I mean, really being able to inspire, being able to communicate not just the challenges around our ocean and using it, but also to inspire impact solutions. Is something that's just really wonderful. And the more people we have doing that, the better. What I love about your app is that it inspires solutions not just for people, but also for ocean dependent people who rely on the ocean for food, right? And of course, I mean, food, yes, so close to all of our hearts. So, I mean, inspiring that impact is something that Mirella made very clear is something that we can all do, no matter what, sector we come from. And so I'd like to turn now to Anne-Cécile, who comes from a very different sector. Anne-Cécile, you play a key part in the ocean race, and that is able to convene thousands of spectators. And now you're using this platform to really communicate about ocean issues and raise ocean awareness. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, the work started in reality with a simple fact. Research has shown that in the US, 16% of the people, of the population, are following science, and more than 70% of the population is following sport. And from that understanding and that knowledge, we felt that as the ocean race, which is one of the oldest ocean racing global sports event existing, we had an opportunity, we had a challenge, even more than a responsibility. And we felt that using the power of sport to inspire change, using the power of sport to become the catalyst to accelerate ocean health restoration, was a very powerful program. So during the last edition of the race, and for those who don't know the ocean race, because the event has changed name, it was previously called the Volvo Ocean Race, and before that, the Whitbread. And we're going to celebrate 50 years of existence in 2023. It's a sailing race that is going around the world in 9 months, 10 stopovers, racing in crew, going in places where nobody has been. There have been more people climbing Everest than sailing the ocean race. It's to say, that we are really ocean experts and we are able to race around the ocean and around the planet with the ocean knowledge, which is another very interesting element, I think. The ocean knowledge of the currents, of the weather forecast, of all the ocean data. So it's really helpful as well for our sailors to win the race. And we can draw a lot of analogies between the ocean race and the race for the ocean that needs to happen. But what I felt where the opportunity is really the fact that it's not only a sport event that has also a footprint or an impact. It's not only about putting our own house in order, it's using the immense opportunity and the voice that a sport event can have, reaching, it's more than thousands, it's millions of people worldwide to actually pass on the message. Our playground as ocean racers is threatened by several issues. We've tackled ocean plastic pollution during the last edition of the race with a very strong partnership with UN Environment and the Clean Seas campaign. We had a boat even called Turn the Tide in Plastic with a mixed crew and a lot of young people as well. And now the scale of the issue and the challenge is even higher. So we're tackling ocean health as a whole. The new name of the sustainability program is called Racing with Purpose. We are equipping boats, sailing boats, racing boats with scientific device in order to better collect ocean data, better understand what's at stake in the ocean. Because as we all know, the data is missing and we need more informed data. And so even if we are a small drop in a big need of ocean need, it feels like our data, building on top of other type of ocean data, can really make a powerful change. And not only that, we have a very strong science program, but we also have an education program targeting primary schools, soon secondary schools, and adult education program as well to increase ocean literacy and inspire thousands and millions of young generation in the schools, in the sailing schools, to understand what's at stake and really empower them to act. And to finish, it's also about the creation of a series of events called the Ocean Race Summits. So we will organize at the end of the race in 2023, 12 ocean summits around the world, gathering, really playing the role that we want to play, is acting as a catalyst, bringing people together, private sector, scientists, academia, institutions, and the public, to be able to actually open the dialogue, drive the discussion, design a roadmap for action to accelerate ocean health restoration. And that's very important.
I mean, as someone who has followed the ocean race since it was the Whitbread, since when I was a child, I mean, this is just so great to hear that now it's being used to really transform our relationship with the ocean and the way we engage with it. And so one of the things I love that you said, though, was that many of us feel it's our responsibility. And that is absolutely true. And I'm sure all of the panelists will echo those sentiments. And so I wanted to turn now to each of you on really, how are you planning to engage with the Ocean Decade? Perhaps, Richard, we could start with you. I think you're running a global creative challenge, an open source exhibition as part of the Ocean Decade. Again, can you tell us a little bit more about this?
Absolutely. And, after sort of 10 years of learning, working in ocean science and conservation, we've come to the conclusion that, the biggest issue of all is the image of ocean science and conservation. You look at the difference between support for space science and ocean science, and it's, there's 10 times the investment in space science. People are excited about the subject. You've got Elon Musk, coming up with amazing imagery that is just so engaging. And then you've got people like Jeff Bezos wanting to get involved. And suddenly you just get this such momentum and energy around a subject. And we haven't got that for ocean science and conservation, but we can. It's something that brands do all the time, is refresh their brands, get the imagery right, and create excitement around the subject. And so that's what we're doing, is engaging the creative community to really get involved in this space. And we're working with Adobe as our sort of brand partner, and going out to the creative community. They call them the Gen Create community, and really challenging them to communicate about oceans, ocean science and conservation in really refreshingly different ways. And then we're exhibiting that, with a big open source exhibition that's going to be traveling around the world over the decade and growing, focusing on transforming the image of ocean science and conservation, but also about raising awareness about the importance of the ocean. So really underpinned by the 7 principles of ocean literacy, which is the inspiration for the creatives getting involved. And we're hoping lots of brands will get involved as a result and really help to transform that image of ocean science and conservation.
I mean, it is really about having that ability, and again, thank you for stepping into that space where we are taking it to as many people as possible, and really again transforming that narrative around the ocean. And so, Mirella, I was hoping that you could potentially tell us a little bit more about where you see the app falling into this picture as well.
Yes. So. The Fish Market app, although it's an app which main purpose is to connect small-scale fishers to consumers for fishery sustainability and food sovereignty, it does create a channel of communication between those groups. And therefore, it offers a new channel for communication and knowledge exchange. So I see knowledge exchange as an important thing to talk about, rather than thinking only of science communication, and rather than thinking of only a one-way street where scientists are communicating knowledge to local stakeholders or communicating knowledge to local resource users like small-scale fishers. So I see potential for creating that two-way communication channel where small-scale fishers can also share information from being in the ocean, from being in contact with fisheries directly, and where consumers and other groups who may become app users, and the app can still evolve to so many other things in the future, because for now it's only a prototype version, and there's so much room to think about ways of incorporating scientific data into it, or citizen science methods, and have both consumers and fish harvesters contribute data to the app, and maybe different ways of visualizing data that is collected in that way. So I see it as a very exciting engagement tool, where even though the initial step was because of food and increasing access to food from the ocean, I see a lot of potential for that knowledge exchange between different stakeholder groups, and have them collaborate and work together more for sustainable fisheries with that common goal.
And so I think, that message of it being a knowledge exchange, a two-way process or multilateral process, really does align very well with a lot that we heard in our first panel this morning. And, all of this that you just mentioned, Mirella, at our fingertips in our phones. So again, really wonderful. So I know we've talked a little bit about a lot of the successes, a lot of your plans, a lot of the exciting positive action that you're hoping for. But of course, communicating about the ocean can also be pretty challenging. So I was hoping to hear a little bit from each of you, and I know we're putting those on time, on challenges that you've faced, as well as potentially the solutions that you've come with. So Katie, perhaps we could start with you.
Sure. I think one of the biggest challenges that I think ocean scientists need to get over when it comes to engaging the public is ourselves, actually. We think we're really smart, and we are, and that we know how to do everything, but we don't. If we truly want to reach millions or billions of people around the world over the course of this ocean decade, we need to partner with organizations who already do that and who aren't already preaching to our own choir, right? There's no sense in reinventing the wheel when there are organizations that have literally spent decades or centuries and millions of dollars on reaching huge numbers of people. So that's why working with organizations like National Geographic is really important to me. First of all, its mission is aligned with mine, which is absolutely critical. And second, its reach and brand recognition are unparalleled. And in addition to working with large multinational organizations, I also want to stress the importance of working with smaller local organizations who know their audiences really well. And Mirella alluded to this a little bit earlier. So those two recommendations may seem sort of in opposition to each other, but really the point is that partnerships with the right organizations and not necessarily already ocean organizations are absolutely critical. And ocean scientists, I think, need to put our egos aside and work with those who are really, really good at reaching everybody all over the world.
Thank you, Katie. So we're going to have to end the panel there, unfortunately, but we do have an opportunity to really discuss more when we're taking questions with the audience. But I just wanted to end on, what Katie said was such a lovely end, and just to really reiterate that this panel that we're joined by today is really, really transcending audiences and really making sure that we aren't preaching to the choir. And I'm just looking forward to the questions that the audience might throw at us in the next 7 or so minutes. So thank you, everyone. Monica.
Thank you, Diva. I was listening with great interest, and I have to say, when Richard was asked about, the funding state and the ability to actually do the ocean science, and he compared it to space science. I do a lot of space science conferences, and just suddenly had this thing, aha! So space science is sexy, ocean science isn't. At least not in the wide perception. So we have to do something about that. And this panel certainly contributed to that already. May I just point out that everyone who was listening to this now can also go to the chat, not in order to go away from here, but because in the chat there are some recommendations for additional reading material on those issues discussed, including publications. So whenever you have time, check it out and read up on it. And indeed, we do have questions. And Katie, you were just the last person to speak, and you'll be the first in this Q&A round as well, addressed by myself here. There's a question. Somebody loves the idea of increasing the potential for all people to be part of ocean discovery, yet how will you ensure that tech will not be the ocean waste of the future?
That is an excellent question, and it is I don't know the answer. I'll be very upfront with you. But I think that it is a surmountable problem. There are lots of people working on different materials and different ways of doing things. I am keenly aware that we do not want to just start sending out thousands of plastic things that end up sitting on the bottom of the ocean, even though I do think that sending out thousands of robotic things is the best way to collect information all over the world in a very efficient way. So I don't have the answer for you right this moment, but it is very high on my priority list to ensure that whatever we do is not going to result in litter all over the world's oceans.
I prefer an honest answer than one that is trying to make something up. So thank you very much for that, Kate.
Absolutely.
The next one is a question for both Marella and Anne-Cécile. So let's split it. Question is this, there is a wide gap between the developed and developing nations in the advancement of ocean technology. How will your initiatives during the Ocean Decade bridge this gap in knowledge, exploration and use? Mirella, perhaps you would like to start.
Sure. So I'm originally from a developing nation. I'm originally from Brazil, and I've been here in Canada for some time now. So I do have that in mind as part of my background, and where I even went to school to study oceanography. We have to be very creative when you come from that background. Sometimes you don't have the tech or the equipment to conduct research or on the same way you would do in a developed nation. With the app, I do know that many developing countries now and many small-scale fishers do use their cell phones to communicate amongst themselves through WhatsApp or different communication apps. And that has been more and more the case in Brazil, for example. That's what I can speak more to. So I do see in the case of the fish market app, which is what I can speak to, I do see the app having potential to be used, and I do plan on expanding it to other countries where people do use their phones already for communicating about fisheries and selling fish and seafood, to become more of another tool for them to engage with consumers and with the public. So I do see this potential, but we do need to acknowledge limitations, and we do need to acknowledge, all the limitations that developing countries have, but also the big opportunities that come with those limitations, the creativity and different ways of addressing issues.
All right, with an eye on the clock, I toss that same question directly to Anne-Cécile.
Yeah, so we are around the world sailing race, and we are, of course, very concerned to make sure we are absolutely inclusive in our decision-making process, in our programs. We want to avoid a recent syndrome of, decisions being designed by white male on yoga mats, being criticized by indigenous people around ocean matters. So it's not an easy journey, but we're trying to include as many as possible. So first, we've created a blue carbon fund for our offsetting initiatives that will go directly to ocean restoration projects, plant-based ocean restoration projects. Then in our ocean summits, we're also engaging dialogue with all the indigenous people, local communities, organizations and associations that are representing everybody. And in the next engagement platform that we're going to create, that we're going to release soon, it's a very important element for us as well, to make sure that we have the voice of everybody around this planet, a little bit the same way as where we're visiting the 10 key countries around the world. So it's an excellent question, and we should not forget that, for sure.
Definitely not. And a very similar one is the final one that goes to Richard. So Richard, you have the last almost complete minute for that question. Do you have plans to expand your initiative to include traditional or indigenous art and imagery of the ocean? Because this would also be a way of contributing to the inclusivity issues discussed in this and the previous panel. Richard.
Absolutely. And the whole idea of sort of transforming the image of ocean science and conservation is for it to be inclusive. So every stage from the creative challenges are being sort of promoted in different areas and regions, and we're wanting people to get involved. And likewise with the exhibition work, we're making that open source as well and getting that into hundreds of venues around the world. So not just in the usual sort of spots in sort of Western countries, but the developing nations. Let's get this to be free and open source to really raise awareness in the areas that matter most in many regards. So
thank you.
Absolutely, very keen.
Fantastic. Thank you, Richard, and thank you, Diva. Thank you for excellent moderation and this fantastic panel. Again, ended far too soon, but you're around, you're part of the platform, people can reach out to you. And we're actually now taking a very short break. Maybe you should do that too, get some fresh air, make a cup of tea or coffee, or stay glued to the screen, because two social media sites, @BMBF and @UN Ocean Decade, they go online now and they post, if you like, an invitation for you to engage. So check it out, but I'll see you back here in 10 minutes for the third and final segment of this core event, where we look at engaging in collective action. So see you then. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our first Ocean Decade Laboratory, an inspiring and engaging ocean. We already had two very, very inspiring and highly interesting panel discussions looking at various aspects, how to create the ocean we want. Now we turn to the third segment. Engaging in collective action. No one is left behind. Yeah, and here we want to showcase examples how to develop and reinforce the understanding of our dependence on the ocean. Keywords are ocean literacy, education, innovative tools. All of that will be discussed in this next session, which will be hosted by Captain Londi Nkopo. She's a ship navigator and the first female dredge master. And there she is. Hello, it's so good to see you. We very much look forward to this next panel. I think I can tell you already, you probably know that sadly one of your panelists is not available. I think there are some technical issues, but the panel as it is right now looks fantastic, and I'm sure it will give us lots of very valuable insight. So everybody else, of course, out there, keep the questions coming in. We will try to get as many as possible to the speakers during the Q&A. But first, over to you, Captain Lon.
Thank you so much, Monica. Thanks for having my back. A huge greeting and to everyone. Apologies about that. I am now here and alive and cannot wait to unpack this amazing session with you. We obviously connected through across the oceans and miles away from each other, and we'll be unpacking and discussing the opportunities and first-hand examples of how we can develop and reinforce the understanding of our defense on the ocean. Like Monica did say, this will be done through ocean literacy, education, as well as innovative tools. Now, today, I think that the experts that we have, we've selected the cream of the crop to be able to make sure that no one is left behind. But we want to make alive, make vibrant, sustainable, and obviously accessible the very oceans that connect us. Now, once again, yes, thanks, Monica, you did share that one of our panelists won't be here, and that is Anissa, the founder, or rather the head of media programs at Sparks News, whom I'm sure would have shared this with us and her wealth of knowledge within the media side. Now, at this moment, I just want to introduce our panelists today, and we had brought just the cream of the crop with us, and we bring you so much energy and making sure that even wherever you sit, you will be certain that we leave no one behind. Now, allow me to introduce you Anita, who's the founder and CEO of the Young Marine Explorers and the Cat Island Conservation Institute. We also have Dr. Jonathan, who is at the National Geographic, and she's also a chief scientist for the Exploration Technology Lab, focusing on the Deep Sea Research Program. We've got Dr. Zen, the thorn amongst the roses right now, Dr. Zen, who is the professor at the Institute of Hydrobiology, a Chinese Academy of Sciences. Your moderator, all the way from South Africa. Colleagues, thank you so much for joining us. I know we're going to be making this so exciting and insightful for the rest of our colleagues out there. Now, let's just jump straight to it. And maybe a similar question to everyone to begin with. In respective initiatives and organizations, I just want everyone to know how you guys and your organizations are influencing a collective action to bring about change during this ocean decade, and how you're ensuring that no one is left behind. Let me start with amazing work you've done, Nikita. But tell us, please, from your experience, how can community-based initiatives with your young marine explorers, how can community-based initiatives be developed through mobilization and a collective action? And maybe just gradually to social change while ensuring that no one is left behind. Nikita, hello.
Hi, it is beautiful to be here. I'm joining you today from Arthurstown, Cat Island, a remote island in the Bahamas. And it is just, I think, so amazing to be having this conversation. I'm honored to be on this panel with you and to be spreading ocean love. And ocean love is really what we do and is at the heart of, I think, all how we address the climate and ocean challenges that we're faced with over this next decade. And what we've been doing here in Cat Island has really been working with our community from all ages, from the very young all the way to the young at heart and a bit wiser in age, to expose us to education for climate solutions, education for the ocean that we want. And this really looks like creating these tangible actions. So with my community right now, I'm training the very first cohort of what will be certified community marine scientists. This is made up of individuals who, some of whom haven't graduated from high school, some who are fishers and farmers and hoteliers, and really prior to becoming part of our community lab and our team have never had a connection with the ocean. But we understand that for our financial sovereignty as islanders, as people from an ocean nation, a blue exit strategy is critical, because we need to ensure that we have sustainable, thriving livelihoods. And what that requires is that we have the skills and the tools to be able to tap into the wealth of material and resources that our ocean has to offer. And you can hear my dog Ocean, who's sending her love. But that, in short, is what we're doing. We are acknowledging lovingly where we are, and that it is a crisis. The sea levels are rising, our corals are dying, and we are training a team, a cohort of ocean guardians who will have the skills to take advantage of all the opportunities that the ocean presents to us, which, as I mentioned, includes this financial sovereignty, and that also enables us to honor our interconnectedness within our global community, because we share one ocean. And collectively together, this is how we are going to ensure that we have a healthy ocean to support flourishing communities like mine here in Cat Island, and yours in South Africa, and everyone else who are coastal ocean-loving people around the world.
Lovely, lovely, lovely. Thank you, Nikita. Wow, amazing.
This conference.
I think that it is too standing that no matter how far we are from each other, we all speak the language of ocean, and we can all play our parts, the smallest and the largest ways possible. This is just amazing, Nikita. Dr. Jonathan, I'm interested to know. We have the UN Ocean Professional that is endorsed by the United Nations. That program. How can that program move beyond the platform and show a reach by young people in science and maybe the ocean decade as a whole?
Yes, thank you. First of all, thank you so much for having me on this wonderful panel talking about an inspiring and engaging ocean. I'm excited to be joining you from Hawaii today. It's the wee hours of the morning, so I'm waking up to a wonderful conversation. So thank you for having me. And to the question about the UN endorsed ECOP program, how do we move beyond the platitudes and ensure real engagement in ocean science in the ocean decade? This is a very pertinent question, and the ECOP program mission is to incorporate new ways of thinking into global sustainability and stewardship challenges through diverse engagement by empowering ECOPs with meaningful network and professional development opportunities. And the vision of the ECOP program is to elevate and strengthen the diverse perspectives of new generations of ocean professionals in a collective voice, ensuring that knowledge is transferred between experienced and early career professionals to promote sustainability. And to move beyond the platitudes, it will take organization and coordination among programs and activities to ensure representation and engagement in all decade actions. So for example, we're having discussions about having an ECOP, early career ocean professional liaison in each program. For example, the Marine Life 2030 program, a global integrated marine biodiversity information management and forecasting system for sustainable development and conservation, has already initiated these dialogues as a foundation for the program. And so it's in the very beginning, the creation of what we want these programs to be engaging early career professionals in the very beginning, so that it's not an afterthought. So other programs and activities as you embark on your actions for the decade, be in touch. Please be in touch with the ECOP leads to identify expertise and interests through our growing network of ECOPs. And similarly, if you're an ECOP and a part of these programs and not yet a part of the ECOP initiative, reach out and become a part of our network so that we can have this cross-dialogue exchange. So actually, as a part of this laboratory, representatives of the ECOP program will be hosting a side event to talk about specifically the vision, the mission, the activities of the ECOP program, and also launch our website so that people can join us and learn more and join our activities so that we can have this cross-dialogue exchange from the very beginning and not as an afterthought.
Lovely, lovely, great. Oh my word. Thank you so much, Dr. Jennifer. I see, you know, just standing here, realize really no one is left behind at this stage. It's amazing how many programs you've already developed in such a short period of time and, you know, leading change, you know, on the forefront, and it's really fascinating. I'm keen to listen to also Dr. Zan. Dr. Zan, the aquariums, just realizing, you know, the magnitude and, you know, this captive audience of millions of people, how can they use their unique position to educate and inform and ensure that no one is left behind? Because, I mean, when you imagine the aquarium, you just want to, you know, pop in, see, learn a thing or two, and walk out and just take pictures. But how are you making sure no one is left behind in making sure that they educate and inform as much as possible?
Okay, thank you for the question. First, I have the number of aquarium audience, over 7 million per year. It's about 10% population of the whole population of the world. Such a unique position, aquarium have been playing a very important and irreplaceable role to educate and to inform people about ocean issues. Aquariums can provide and induce a real change. Aquarium, I think, is a window of the underwater world. We human beings belong to terrestrial animal. We live on water, on ocean. Well, we are quite unfamiliar with the ocean and feel deeply mysterious about the ocean. Usually, love begins from knowing. We only love what we know. We only care what we love. Aquarium is just, as I said, a window for publics, showing people in 1,000 reconstituted and faithful to what is found in the nature. This approach allows the wonder, which pushes them to know more. In addition to this, people could also find all the current topics on the oceans, on the species, their biology, and especially the role they play to highlight the importance of protecting them and protecting biodiversity. With new technologies, digital, aquarium can make this information more digestible, easier to integrate, allowing the visitor to spend a unique moment to relax and learn at the same time. Moreover, aquariums can organize actions or initiatives, embark their visitors. As I know, in European aquariums have initiates such as World ocean network, the passport of the ocean. The European Commission launched a campaign, got over 200 aquariums around the world called Single-Use Plastic. Are you ready to change? I also heard Monterey Bay Aquarium has created Seafood Watch to empower the citizens on fish consumption. Nausicaa in France and its European friends has created Mr. Godfish with very valuable results, and so forth. We have more examples and stories to show actions and campaigns initiated or implemented by aquariums. Many most important international and political authorities have understood that aquariums are a great tool and are becoming indispensable to create a real awareness and educate the greatest number of people. Thank you.
Oh, Dr. Zain, thank you. Lovely. We only love what we know. Absolutely amazing. I truly, truly appreciate that take, and I think it is a core discussion for the ocean decade that we can all unpack for many, many years to come, leading up to 2030. Now, I think it's very encouraging, like just hearing how diverse and inclusive our industry is. I keep saying that without role models and change agents like our panelists today, our oceans will really be at great risk and maybe beyond rescue in no time. And maybe this is also fitting, it's fitting to know what and encourage others. Maybe back to you, Nikita. What kind of citizenship education and community building activities maybe that you've done or undertaken to engage local community and develop innovative solutions in order to address maybe certain threats that the island ecosystem might have? How can we be encouraged and inspired as well to just raise our hands and answer into this call?
Wonderful. Thank you so much. This is a great question. So what we've been doing here in Cat Island over the past really a decade has been building and developing a model for community-driven marine conservation. And so this has taken many different shapes and forms, and it's grounded in the understanding that we need to develop real, meaningful relationships with the people that we live, work, and play with. That is the only way that we are going to save our oceans. And so what that looked like, translating it into action here in Cat Island, was me, beginning to work with youth throughout the island, teaching people how to scuba dive, learning different coral ID, going through our Young Marine Explorers citizen science curriculum, which has been based off of the UNESCO Sandwatch curriculum, really about how do we engage and ensure that youth and community members can get involved in citizen science, and really developing and learning the scientific skills that are going to enable community members to have the tools to move out of these challenges that we're faced in. For so many of us in the remote communities, we face harsh realities, and the language of science and policy often do not reach our ears because they're not addressing our needs. And so how we've been going about doing our work is being very clear on what are the real lived realities and challenges that members in our community are faced with, and how then do we co-create solutions, build ocean-based businesses, which is what we're working on now, that creates prosperity for us, but enables us to have the financial resources and the collective vision to create a healthy ocean that supports thriving and flourishing communities.
Oh, lovely, lovely, lovely. I like how you just, owning the space and just going all out to ensure that everyone is not left behind, especially the youth in your area, or rather in your community. Jonathan, I speak again for the youth, to encourage and inspire the youth. In your field, are there any innovative ways in which young people can make their voices heard and maybe ensure that they have a seat in the decision-making table, understanding that they are very innovative and they come with fresh brains and they come with, colorful ideas? What's your take on this? Are there any innovative ways they can be involved?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that question. So within the ECOP group, we have an ocean literacy task team. And part of the vision for this task team is to engage a multiplicity of voices so that everybody can see themselves as a part of the decade and that they have a role to play in ocean sustainability. And so our mission and what we're kind of working on now is how do we highlight these voices and elevate them so that people can identify and see themselves as an ocean scientist, as an ocean citizen, and be moved to speak up and to take part as well. And so a couple of the innovative ways that we've been kind of brainstorming and working towards is there's one a video that we're making on ocean voices, compiling a video from whoever would like to contribute on the topic of what does the ocean mean to you. And so pulling together this video and sharing it widely so that others can see people like themselves as a part of this movement and be inspired to act as well. We're also putting together a seminar series for early career professionals to talk about our work and our views and perspectives. We had an art contest earlier where people, for the virtual ECOP day, where people could, share their art on what the ocean means to them as well. So art and speaking opportunities, videos, we come from a diversity of viewpoints and backgrounds, and everybody will have different strengths to share. And so we really want to encourage that diversity and different ways of sharing. And so in my own perspective, I'm a trained scientist, but I grew up immersed in the arts. So I really kind of make sense of the world and express myself through art. And I see art and science as intertwined and kind of working together towards the same goal to discover and share the wonders of our world. And I found opportunities in, speaking at conferences and meetings, wherever I could, to speak up about this, the importance of integrating art and science, even if it was not about exactly that topic, but feeling empowered to share your perspective and share kind of maybe a different way of looking at things. And by sharing that, I found that there are many other people who also feel the same way. And so that would, come and ask questions and, how do we do this together? How do we support one another in this quest? And so by sharing the kind of out of the box and different perspectives, you kind of can build this community of practice together to lift each other up and move forward. So that's what we want to do in the very beginning, is just highlight these kind of very diverse viewpoints and perspectives through art, through videos, through seminars. And again, another good example is the Marine Life 2030 program. Already from the very beginning, as I mentioned before, incorporating the voices of early career professionals as representatives in the beginning of the program, as well as artists in the very initial dialogues of how to move forward with this program. So incorporating diverse perspectives through a multitude of ways, including art and storytelling, which is my passion.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, I can actually tell that your passion lies in storytelling, with all these programs that have so much meaning behind and so much insight based on your passion for the industry. I truly appreciate it. How I wish I had more time. I so wish we had more time. I guess I know that you enjoy.
I'm so so sorry. You're breaking up. But you know what? I was standing here sort of having, crossing my fingers all the time. It worked up until now. We could hear everything up until now. But now in those final seconds, Londi, you broke up. Nevertheless, there's some questions that we have, and there's one for you. So I will try if we can get the sound repaired, and basically would start straight away with you here, because you talked about role models, many of you did, and you obviously are one yourself. From your experience, somebody would like to know what are some of the obstacles that you have encountered in your career, and what advice would you give to young women following in your footsteps? Just trying if I can hear you.
Thank you for the question, and please just shout if you can't hear me. Thank you for the question, though. I love it. I suppose that is closest to my heart also, role modeling. I mean, being African, being a female, in the only 2% of female participation in this industry. For me, it has always been being first, and yes, there's so many first, but ensuring that I'm not the last. I am that woman whom, when I get a DM from the youth and they say, Captain Londi, I want to be like you, I have to hold their hands. And platforms like this allow me to be able to say, come through. I know a few people, and your career will be just as maybe smooth or just as flourishing as you aspired to be. But thanks for the question.
Brilliant. And that is really what role modeling is all about. Not elbowing your way through and say me, but not the rest, but actually opening the door for others and giving them a hand and taking them through. Thank you so much for this answer. The next question is for Nikita. Again, your work so inspirational. How do you convince young people to choose the ocean as a career over so many other and certainly more lucrative options, for example, in the private sector? How do you convince them?
Well, I thank you so much for that question. I think it's so important. And I want to emphasize, for me, this work, it started with the youth, but now it's about the entire community. And really for us in the Bahamas, for the big ocean nations of the world, often referred to as small island states, we have no choice. Like our world is changing. Our past economies have been primarily really funneled and driven by tourism. And many of us are in poverty and are struggling. And the ocean is a beacon of hope. I believe it is our exit strategy. I think our ocean will be able to provide a quality of life for all islanders that will enable us to settle into a more easeful and graceful way of being. Island nations, especially those of us from the Caribbean, we have a very complex history as it relates to colonization, as it relates to how we ended up on these islands. And my dream really is over this next decade that we will, myself and my team, we're getting ready to buy a boat because you can't explore the ocean without a boat. So we're going to set up our research vessel by the end of this decade that every single Bahamian, every single islander will really see a future in honoring the ocean, in finding inspiration and solace in the bounty and magic that the ocean has to offer. And more importantly, that collectively as a global community, we're celebrating because we've shifted into a new way of being, remembering that we are nature and that when we truly invest in that which protects us, we thrive.
Then do let me at this moment bring Jonathan in, talking about the ECOPs. The ECOPs that developed the program for the decade to see, what would they like to see happen by the end of the decade? So there are a few years. What would success look like?
Yes, great question. So success would be really opening the door for the next generation of ECOPs, and training this generation coming up that there's this knowledge transfer between the senior scientists and the early careers, a smooth knowledge transfer, as well as an infusion of new and inspiring ideas from the next generation, where the ECOPs now will really be the ones carrying the torch and moving taking the success beyond the decade, through our careers. And really, success would be kind of paving this pathway to make it easier for the next generation to smoothly come in and to do the same. So, networking, professional development, all smoothly transition throughout the process so that this knowledge can be handed down and we can successfully bring the ocean to sustainability into the future.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jonathan. And at this point, I have one last question. We don't really have the time for it, but I want to be fair and pass it on to Sang. There are a lot of highly respected universities in China that focus on ocean issues. Does your aquarium work with scientists from these universities to carry out research?
Yes. We have many researchers focus on ocean, as well as for the freshwater ecosystem. As myself, I mainly work on freshwater dolphins and porpoise in the Yangtze River. So through our work, we tell the story for people that this endangered animal lost their home means we will lost our future. So through this kind of example, we try to see not only the species themselves, but their habitat, the environment. I think the things have been changed in China greatly.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you to the entire panel. Again, all the participants will be reaching out to you for more, especially you, Nikita, now that we clarified that. Thank you. So thank you so much, Captain Londi, Nikita, and Sang, and of course, Jonathan. You still have a little bit of work to do because you already obviously talked about the Virtual Early Career Ocean Professional Day. You touched upon it, but I think there's a little bit more to share with us. For example, when did it take place? Who was in charge? Who was it for? If you would like to enlighten us.
Yes, thank you. So the Virtual Early Career Ocean Professional Day, or as we call in short, VECOP Day, took place on June 1st as a 24-hour live stream event following the sun around the world. And it was hosted by and for early career ocean professionals from around the world and from a variety of ocean disciplines to showcase their work, activities, and contributions to the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development.
And what does the United Nations Ocean Decade mean to you? How does the VCOP Day contribute to that?
So as we all know, the UN Ocean Decade is a once-in-a-generation opportunity and the first global campaign to catalyze transformative ocean science solutions for sustainable development. And VECOP Day followed immediately from the first international conference of the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. It was organized by the German Marine Research Consortium in cooperation with the ECOP program. And support for the officially endorsed UN Decade activity was provided by Fisheries and Oceans Canada, the European Commission, IOC UNESCO, the German Federal Ministry of Education and Research, and Esri Deutschland. And almost 200 presenters from more than 40 countries shared their ideas, projects, artistic contributions over those 24 hours. And panel discussions were spread throughout the program to offer all contributors an opportunity to discuss with others. Our aim was to create a new community, a global community of ECOPs.
So that community that you were reaching out to, I mean, who was that audience? Who were you trying to get in?
Well, we welcomed over 2,000 participants from more than 80 countries. And after 24 hours, we already had 4,000 views on YouTube. And so far have already reached over 50,000 people via Twitter. The VECOP Day also offered a cinema with 50 different films on various ocean topics. and an exhibition hall with 21 exhibitors, including organizations like ICES, Pisces, the Pacific Community, WIOMSA, industrial companies like Kongsberg, and NGOs.
So it sounds like a really, really successful event. What's next?
So we've created a story map to keep track of the many valuable contributions, and we would like to integrate these where relevant into the UN Decade Ocean Laboratories or the ECOP program.
Fantastic. Jonathan, thank you so much for filling us in, and I'm sure people can get in touch with you via the platform. I think all the details of the speakers are there on the agenda if you go into the right slot, because I'm sure people will have more questions about that initiative. So thank you again to you, Jonathan, and of course the entire panel.
Thank you so much. Good day.
And that brings us almost to the end of this very first Ocean Decade Laboratory. We'll get some recap done in a moment, but first we revisit the topic of empathy. So empathy was mentioned several times today, certainly also with Dr. Britton in big detail. And I would like to pick up on that now with Dr. Erica Woosley. She's joining us now. Good to see you. Hello. Now, Erica is a marine biologist from the Hydrus. That is an international community of scientists, divers, designers, filmmakers, and technologists on a mission to create open access ocean. That sounds very promising. And as far as I know, you have proposed a decade of ocean empathy as part of the Decade of Ocean Science. Please tell us more about that. Okay, we tried to revisit Dr. Woosley, but in the meantime, we have another speaker on the line, namely Vladimir Ryabinin. He is the Executive Secretary of the IOC and therefore a co-organizer of this event. Vladimir, good to see you. Hopefully the sound works this time, because I would like to know what your main takeaways of this event were.
And I hope it really works, because, okay, thank you for nodding. So, I would like also to thank you for your stamina and professionalism, because, indeed you said a lot of technology, but I would like also to say a lot of empathy and a lot of professionalism is required to run this big event the way you do. And and this is a very important thing, actually, because we are professionals in ocean science. Actually, I'm starting my recap now, but I will do it a little bit differently, not just by repeating all the wonderful things that we have heard, but I'd like to say that indeed the professionalism is requiring not only kind of dry knowledge and accuracy. Accuracy is important, but also some emotion. I think everything was here. And what we are trying to do here is, in the decade, is exactly to bring together all these elements, the knowledge, the emotion, the passion. And this is very important because, it is by understanding that we have to go through the human side of the things to save the ocean. We found that formulation, and I'm absolutely stunned by the idea of the decade of ocean empathy. I would like also to say that in principle, we developed our species in competition between ourselves, in competition between us and other species, and we now have won. We won this planet. Now, if we are owning the planet, we have to care about this. We have to care about the ocean. But in our genes, sit that competitiveness, sit that animal behavior, that to be the first, to eat more, and to suppress others. So this is what we're going to change. And this requires indeed passion, this requires engagement, and that's exactly what is embedded in the 7th societal outcome of the decade that we're discussing now, inspiring and engaging ocean. Let's love the ocean. And this love, like Leonardo da Vinci says, comes from the knowledge. Only precise knowledge of the ocean may take you to the love, to the object of your love, you know. And this is what we're trying to do. So ocean will help us to be better animal, to be more human animal, and also ocean will help us, I think, to overcome the issues that exist now. And we will help the ocean if it will become better. And that's exactly the societal challenge of our decade, to change the ocean and to change us in our relations with the ocean. I think we are getting there. Saving the ocean from technical side is equally important. Now, this requires indeed a lot of knowledge, observations, data, and we have that part. But you know, without human involvement, without our hearts, not only brains, we won't be able to do it. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. And I think this is what is the recap. The recap is that we heard a lot of wonderful people speaking about their passion, speaking about their knowledge, and trying to unite forces towards saving the ocean on the basis of science. This definitely requires design, or rather co-design. And this is where we are. We are now co-designing the science we need. We co-design also the relations we want. And this takes us to something that I think was manifesting in the climate science, that really coined the social contract of climate science, that led to the agreement, or the Paris Agreement on climate. Now, without any big agreement on the ocean, we are moving forward towards saving the ocean on the basis of science and on the basis of improvement of our species itself. So that's the picture that I have from this meeting. Thank you very much, Monica, for creating that picture, at least on me.
Thank you so much, Vladimir, for also encapsulating it and basically reflecting it as a very consummate and complex picture that we were all trying to present here. And it's very nice to know that some of it actually worked. So thank you so much for your comment and your summary there, Vladimir. And I've been told that we do have Dr. Woosley back, so we'll try again, Dr. Woosley. I'm just not saying anything anymore and let you start straight away.
Hi, Monica. Can you hear me okay now?
Yes, loud and clear.
Oh, fabulous. Thank you so much for your patience. We've heard a lot about empathy and connection and ocean love, and I'm just so thrilled to be able to add my voice to that discussion. And we do have a lot of really great research-based evidence that connection to nature and connection to each other is connected to positive conservation behaviors. And I mean, that makes sense. We care about the things and the people that we see and feel. And for our decade program at the Hydrus, which is called the Decade of Ocean Empathy, we seek to connect more people to beautiful and threatened marine environments using our science-based curriculum, human-centered design thinking, which is very much underpinned by empathy, as well as emerging technologies, especially virtual reality, or VR. And a number of VR researchers, including our partners at the Virtual Human Interaction Lab at Stanford University, have found that these 360-degree immersive experiences can actually generate feelings of presence. So it feels like you're diving underwater or you're with somebody else. And that can in turn lead to agency and self-efficacy and pro-social and pro-environmental behaviors. And as a marine scientist who has later been introduced to virtual reality, I really think that VR and the ocean are just a match made in heaven, because you can truly feel immersed and surrounded to utilize that 360-degree view. And so with our Decade of Ocean Empathy, we are formally establishing a content studio and a research lab so that we can co-design open access immersive learning materials and then assess their effectiveness. And to measure impact, we'll be using a mixed method approach with ethnographic interviews and surveys. And the surveys will include specially designed empathy surveys, as well as existing surveys like the very well done International Ocean Literacy Survey, which I believe has been translated into 13 languages. We'll also be keeping records of the total engagement and reach, for instance, the number of users who interact with our programming in person as well as virtually. And we've actually measured that we've led over 1 million virtual dives in the past year. And especially now, it's been such a great way to connect to the ocean and to each other, despite the obvious barriers of distance. And it also helps with the other barriers like cost or physical ability. And the sort of reaction that we get and the conversations we have with people when they come out of virtual reality is just absolutely amazing. And it's so nice to see young learners really feel like they're the scientists and make observations on their own. And we are working with a range of education and technology partners so that we can create ocean access and expand beyond just virtual reality using other classroom tools like our education kits, and making sure that our reach is broader with lower cost methods, like for instance, a cardboard viewer. Now, if anyone's interested in actually joining a virtual dive with me, you can do so with a smart device by moving it around you and having a 360-degree view. And so as Monica shared that great QR code, you can also watch an instructional video posted on this platform in the video section of the program agenda. And so, I mean, it's a really wonderful movement, and it feels like a lot of people are on board with creating this inspiring and engaging ocean. And if anyone remains sort of a healthy scientific skeptic or encounters people that aren't quite convinced, I mean, I would ask them what their ocean story is and what brings you here. And was it a collection of scientific articles or was it personal experiences? And I'm guessing it was a combination of both. So I'm really excited about being part of this movement to create an inspiring and engaging ocean for all. And I really look forward to using every tool that we have at our disposal to generate ocean empathy.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Erica. And it really sounds very, very fascinating, this virtual dive. I just hope that not everybody is shooting into this virtual dive right away, because we have one more speaker and I would like to have her the same attention. But thank you so much. After that, we're all going into that virtual ocean feeling. Our next speaker, again, has a very, very close relationship with the water. Actually, she spends something like 24/7 with the ocean. She's not a fish, but close, a surfer, Maya Gabera, a actual world record holder for the biggest wave ever surfed by a female. Now, I read some articles and found out that this is not necessarily not dangerous, but she's doing it anyway. Maya, good to have you with us. Tell us more about your relationship to the ocean.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Like you said, I'm not a fish. I would like to be one, but I didn't come as a fish. I like to enjoy the ocean. I'm a professional surfer, specialized in big wave surfing. I live in Portugal, and I have a very close relationship with the waves, with the sea. I practice a lot of different ocean sports, and I'm passionate about the ocean. And I understand and try to get more and more knowledge about what the ocean is going through, the challenges it's facing, what we are, overfishing, we are destroying habitats, and all the problems that we're causing to the health of the oceans. I just actually recently went to one of my very favorite places to surf in the world, which is called the Mentawais in Indonesia. Came back a few days ago, spent 2 months there. And the Mentawais is a very remote location. It takes 2 days to get there, 4 planes, a ferry, 2 speedboats. And, in this remote chain of islands off Sumatra, breaks some of the best waves in the world. And unfortunately, I've been going there since I was 18. I'm 34 now. And this year, a few times in the water throughout my 2-month stay there, I was literally surfing in plastic. And it really broke my heart, but it scared me too. I mean, I had traveled for 2 full days and nights to get to somewhere so remote. There was no phone signal, no cars. And still, you know, I was surrounded by plastic, single-use plastic, some flip-flops, some lighters, a lot of plastics that had already deteriorated. I couldn't really tell what was it in the first place, and it broke my heart. I mean, it makes you understand how much of an impact it will continue to have if the industry of single-use plastic and plastic itself continues to grow the way that they're expected to grow. It's not a material that we should be creating the way we are and using the way we are, especially single-use plastic. So I'm with Oceana for many years now, and if you are also worried about plastic, please, I ask you to read about it, join a NGO of your liking. We in Oceana are, taking Amazon, for an instance, who, in 2019 alone, put more than 22 million pounds of plastic in the ocean to find better solutions. To invest on new technologies and to not make us, I buy it from Amazon, so I cannot go and do a checkout free of plastic right now. And that is something that as consumers, we need to insist on. And, the food deliveries, everything that we've been getting home, especially with COVID nowadays, there's so much single-use plastic being thrown around. And I think, we have to be more responsible and more strong to convince policymakers and the big players in the industries that use a lot of plastic to stop and demand them to change. So that was my latest experience.
Maya, very, very serious end to this first Ocean Decade Laboratory, but very important. And of course, because you're in Portugal, that the European Union has, since the beginning of July, banned the sale of single-use plastic. But ultimately, this is the famous drop in the ocean, because so much more plastic is still around and still being produced in so many ways. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because it just shows that it takes more than one Ocean Decade Laboratory to actually find a way to create the ocean that we want, which is what the Ocean Decade is all about. So thank you so much, Maya. And stay safe, of course, where you are. Bye-bye. And thank you to all the participants out there, because now this really brings us to the end of the first Ocean Decade Laboratory. Work continues, we just heard it. In 10 minutes, the interactive workshops begin, and I've just been informed there are still some places available. So just go onto the agenda, click onto the interactive workshops, and make sure that you can register so you can participate. Also, the satellite activities are about to start now in various parts of the world. Again, keep an eye on that. And we will be back tomorrow in the late afternoon in order to do a very all-around wrap-up of everything that happened today, what happens at the satellite activities and the innovation workshop, so we're all on the same plate. And the next Ocean Decade Laboratory, you can already make a note in your diary, because we already know the date, will take place on September the 15th with a wrap-up following. So note it down, and now have great satellite activities, great workshops, a wonderful evening, morning, noon, wherever you are. But I'll see you again tomorrow for our wrap-up.